So hello there and welcome to Delicious Art. Thank you for joining me today. So today's subject is a moon, and here's my notes. So if you've downloaded the video, then you should have also received these notes. It's just a one-pager, and we're painting this picture here today. So I was just telling everyone else in the class today that this is a picture of my painting because I painted this a couple of years ago. I was inspired by a photo someone had posted on Facebook and just got to it and painted it. And a couple of the ladies have said they'd really like to have a go at it. So we're going to paint from my painting because I don't know where the photo is anymore. But this will be a great start. So usually in class we start off with a charcoal drawing and we have a little practice run doing it in charcoal, and then we move on to pastels so that it's like a little rehearsal of the painting that we're doing in each class. But today we're not going to do the charcoal. I think we'll just jump straight into the colour, and it's going to take a little while because there's a fair bit of blending to do, and we've got to be a little bit careful with the colours that we use so we don't make too much mud. But you can see in the picture there is a lot of dark, and then we've got all the beautiful brights as well. So let's get cracking. I'm just going to switch my screen over now so that you can see my desk, and then we will start getting into it. So what you're going to need first up is a piece of paper, and I'm using a black piece of paper today because I did that for the first one that I painted, and I really enjoy how the dark background just seems to enhance all the brights and give some depth. So if you have a dark piece of paper, if it's not black, then maybe a dark blue would be fine. Or even, a red or a purple would be lovely too. So whatever you have in your collection will be okay. And if you don't have anything that's dark enough, then just use whatever you've got, because we will be filling this up with pastel. So you can see I've got my paper taped down onto a little board there. So I've just taped it down on the corners. That's just to keep it nice and still so that while I'm working on it, it's not moving around and I don't need to, hold it down with my other hand. So I've actually got a free hand, and it just makes it a little bit easier. And as I said, I've got my notes here. So what I like to do is prop my reference photo up in front of me somewhere so that when you look back at your reference photo, because we do refer to that quite a lot during the process of doing a painting, you want to have it within eye reach, I guess. So right in front of you is really a really good option, because that way then you're not having to turn your head to look at it. It's easy to see and it's right there. So that's where I like to place it anyway. I just find it much easier if I've just got to look up quickly with my eyes, and then I can go back to my painting and not have to do too much physical movement, pretty much, even though that is a good thing when you move. All right, so I'm just going to mute everybody's sound if that's okay. Lovely. Only because we just don't want any background noise while I'm recording this. If you do have a question though, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm very happy to answer questions and have discussions on the way through, because often, if you have a question or something you want to know, the likelihood of someone else having the same question is pretty high. So don't hesitate to ask if you do have a question. I'm just adjusting my lights here to try and make it bright enough for you to see. All right, so what I have done today is I've picked out some colours already, and when I'm choosing my colours, I like to kind of hover my reference photo over my pastels and then find all the colours that I can see inside the picture that I'm about to paint. So you can see in there I've picked out quite a few pinks and purples and orange. So I did this painting a couple of years ago, so I can't exactly remember what I used precisely, but I can see those colours in there. So I think we'll start with those ones. And if you need to pick up another colour on the way through, if you feel like you want something darker or lighter or different, then by all means, we can do that. But I do find it helpful to start off just with a basic palette at the beginning, and just to try and limit myself to just a few little colours at the start. And as I said, you can always pick up more. So this dark one here is actually a really dark blue. I don't want to use blue violet. Well, I might, but at this point in time, I'm thinking I don't want to use that because it can get a little bit too dark and a little bit too heavy. But I do enjoy this deep dark blue. It's really dark. It looks nearly black. It's so dark, but it's just got a lovely warmth to it that just gives you another depth, I guess. And it's not quite as dirty, I guess would be a good word to use for as the blue violet. So deep dark blue if you have one. If not, go for your blue violet. You might even like to use black. You know, it just depends on what you've got in your palette. So that's my little range of colours. So I'll leave those sitting there for you so you can choose yours as well. I'll just run through them. I've got a very dark blue, so I've tried to put them in order from dark to light into my little box here. Once I start, they won't stay in that order, but it's nice to start off tidy. This is a violet colour, which is quite beautiful. It's a dark sort of magenta reddish colour. I'm just going to see if I can find a bit of paper that I can mark these onto, because it's always good to test your colours as well. So I'll just grab another bit of pastel paper. So I'll just use this. I have a Métien's paper, so it's not the same as the Colour Fix. It's a different texture, but it's still a dark colour. So I'm just going to kind of swatch my pastels onto here and push them around. So if you do have a spare piece of paper, even if it's just a white piece of drawing paper, it's a good idea just to put your colours down onto that and push them around a little bit and just see how they look when they're blended or mixed together. So I've got my dark blue there. This is my kind of a magenta purpley kind of colour. So I can see that in the painting. Can you see that there in the clouds? There's a really beautiful pinky purpley colour. So that's that one. The other one I picked up was another purple. So there's a couple of tones of purple there. So I'm kind of merging them together as I put them on the paper. That's beautiful too. So I can see that in the picture as well. If you want to add other colours that are not in there, by all means go ahead. So this is your painting and you get to do what you want. So I've got my navy blue, magenta, and then a purple. I've got this blue too, which I thought was probably something like what I'd used, which is a light cyan kind of blue. It's quite gorgeous. So that's really lovely. And all these colours together just make the loveliest kind of muds and shadows. So just, you know, don't be afraid to push them around on the paper and see how they look when they're blended together. Even putting, you know, blue on blue, so the two blues together makes a beautiful, beautiful shadow. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for some really nice shadowy colours with these beautiful purples and blues. Okay, so then I've got a pink. So this is a brighter pink, a little bit pinker than the other one. I may or may not use that, but I just want to have it there next to me. And see, when I mix that into that blue, it goes this gorgeous purpley colour. So you can create some really beautiful blends of colour straight onto your paper. The other one I picked up is this. I think it's a blue. Yeah, it's like a sky blue almost, little like a stormy sky kind of blue. So again, that's another colour I can see in there, just in and around here in the clouds. So a little bit of that would be nice. Then I've got orange. So I think I said in the notes, I actually surprised myself when I picked up orange and put it into this painting, because I thought it might turn too muddy and get a bit kind of dirty looking. And it sort of does, but it's quite lovely with the purples. So a bit of orange in here. This is quite a bright orange. I might need to get a quieter one. I don't know yet. But that looks quite lovely, doesn't it? And then if I mix that in with the blues and the purples, get all these yummy, yummy kind of muddy colours. So that's quite nice too. And lovely just for something a little bit different. You might not want to use orange. You don't have to. Then I've got a lighter pink, so I can see a light pink. We're starting to get into the light colours now. So we've moved from dark to mid, and now we're moving into the lights. So that's kind of a pale pink. It's got quite a lot of white in it. So I can see some of that in those clouds as well. So that's rather lovely. And then I've got a very pale blue. So it probably looks white until I put white with it. So pale blue will be nice just to get some of the highlights in those clouds and to push that around to get the lighter clouds going on. And you can, you know, add more and kind of push it in a little bit more and see how you can create such a lovely density of colour on there. Beautiful. So that's a light blue. Actually, I just had a thought. What would be really nice is a very light violet too. I might go and see if I can find one of those. So notice that we're staying in the kind of the blues and reds here. So purple and blue, yeah, purple is made of blue and red. So we've got lots and lots of the blues and the purples going on in here. This is a violet, so it's quite lovely too. That'd be nice in the clouds, in the lighter clouds, just to get a little bit of variation in there. So I'm going to have a bit of that. And then, of course, I've got white. So we usually save the white for last because I want to keep the brightest for the end. But doing these, we're going to be using white during the process. This is quite a creamy one. It's probably a schminky. I can feel it. It's very kind of thick and creamy. And so that's looking, see how much brighter that is than the light blue. So this is where white's important because we get all those gorgeous little highlights happening with your white. And you can make the light shine on the edges of the clouds with it and then softly push them in and kind of fiddle around a little bit. So that's basically my palette that I'm going to be using today. And as I said, if we need to pick up other colours on the way or drop some off and not use them, that's cool too. But it's always good to have a little palette to begin with. Okay, so now we've got that all together. The first thing we want to do before we do anything else is just put a little grid mark onto our paper. So you can see the grid line on the image there. So what I've done is I've divided the page of paper or the image into four sections. So it's into quarters. And you can see I've got a line down the middle and a line across the center there. And just by doing that, you kind of helps you to break up your picture and figure out where everything sits within the whole thing. And so you can see the top right quarter, this one here, that's where most of the moon is. So it's not exactly in the middle of your painting. It's always good to have things slightly off center. So if you have a focus like a moon or a flower or whatever it is you're doing, and there's just one main thing, it's always best to not have it smack in the middle. Now that's just a rule of thumb as far as art goes. Rules are made to be broken, of course. So if you choose to do something and bang it in the middle, then that's cool too. But it's just good to know that usually this sort of thing looks slightly better off center. It just makes it a little bit more interesting to the eye. So what we want to do is find yourself a ruler. And because I'm on dark paper, I'm going to use a white charcoal pencil. Put my picture back there so I can see it easily. And I'm just going to press very lightly with this. So just find your halfway line. So on this paper, it's 30 by 23. So halfway is 15. So just draw my halfway line down through there. And then 11.5 will be half of 23. So I'm marking that on there like that. So once you've got that grid line in, it just helps you to place everything in the right spot. It's quite handy. Okay. I also have the painting or reference photo on my iPad, which is propped up next to me. So if you have an iPad or another device that you can put the picture on, it's a really good idea because you can actually look at it and zoom in and see things close up. You can't do that on a printout. So sometimes when you print out a photo, things get a little bit blurry or you can't quite see enough detail. But having it on a screen means you can just, zoom straight in and have a really good look at it. All right. So what we're going to do first up is we're not going to put the moon in just yet because you can see there's a lot of cloud behind the moon. So there's lots of cloud and sky behind the moon. And I like to work in layers and just work from the back to the front, basically. So we're going to start at the back. So the back in this instance is your paper. So it's the color of your paper. If you don't have a dark paper, that represents all the dark area around your picture. So I'll just show you what I mean by that. So see at the bottom across the picture here, it's quite dark. And I used a black paper when I did this. And I may have left some of this unpainted, basically. So that would probably be some of the black paper showing through. So right across the base here, it's quite dark. And then up in the left-hand corner, we have a fairly dark patch. And then we've got a little bit more up here on the top right. So what I want to do is look at the picture, look at the grid and see where the darks are. Now, I'm going to put my dark blue pastel down where I can see the darks. I might leave some of my paper showing through. I'm just going to see how I feel about that as I go. So what I want to do first up is just get your darkest blue or your darkest colour, whatever you're using. Might be black, might be purple, could be blue violet. And we just want to smush a little bit of that over your page. So what I'm doing is I'm lying the pastel down flat on my page. A bit hard to see because it's dark on dark. Well, this pastel is quite dirty. So if I show you the light sides, it's covered in other colours, you'll be able to see it better. And so I just lie it flat like that and literally rub it over the paper. It sounds a bit scratchy because this paper is like a sandpaper. And you can tell where the grid lines sit as to how low you need to go within each quarter or what shape that dark section is in the quarter there. Okay, so you just want to get some pastel on your page. I know it's hard to see on the dark. I'm going to put a bit of it up here in the top left. Now, the reason I'm putting dark down, even though I've got dark paper, is that I want to be able to kind of merge some of this dark pastel in with my other colours. So to kind of blend everything, you need to have enough pigment or pastel on your paper. If you don't have enough there, then you've got nothing to work with. So it's like, what's an analogy for it? Putting butter on bread. So if you don't put enough butter on, then you've still got a lot of bread, and it's very thin. But if you load the butter on, then you can spread it out more. Does that make sense? So you can kind of move it around a lot more. And when I'm doing a sandwich or toast, I like to have Vegemite, and I like to mix the Vegemite in with the butter so that it kind of all merges together. I think it tastes way better like that. So imagine you're putting something with your butter and you're mixing it through. You want to be able to have enough butter on your paper to allow you to do that. So I've just put some dark blue in a couple of other spots. So on the left of the moon, you can see it's quite dark through there. So just put a bit of dark blue there and a little bit up here behind on the right-hand side. There's a little patch of dark there and down underneath the moon. So you can see a little bit of dark around there. Okay, a bit hard to see, I know. So now I've got that down on my paper, I'm going to move to the next darkest pastel, which I think is this purple or pinky colour. So I've got my little purple one, and I'm just going to smoosh that around. Can you see where there's purple on the page? So we're not blending anything in just yet. What we're doing is just getting some pastel onto the paper so we can then start to push it around and merge it together with our fingers. So I'm just slowly, gently putting a little bit of purple on here. The goal is to kind of fill up the whole page with pastel of some colour or another, and then we can start pushing it around. So I'm just looking at where the purple parts are. If you look closely, you'll see there's a bit of purple up here on the top corner, and there's a little bit here, and that's got a little white or light cloud behind it, so we'll pop that in shortly. This is the process for this will be all about how you move your fingers inside the pastel. So noticing that all these clouds are quite fluffy, they're sort of soft, light, thick, fluffy clouds. So that's what we're going to be kind of working on and moving our hands around to create those shapes. Okay, so I've got some purple on there. Notice I'm not putting a lot of pastel down just yet. So what I want to do is just layer some on to get a bit of a feel for the colours as well. So I've just picked up my pinky colours, my darker pink, and I'm smushing some of that around too, where I can see probably more a reddy purpley colour than a blue purple. And as I said before, if you have other colours that you want to use, then by all means do that. Just be aware of what they do when they mix together. So you just want to kind of think about what's going to happen if I put pink with blue. It's going to go into a purple tone, which is fine. Just be very careful of yellow. You'll notice I didn't pick up any yellow, and I don't think there is any yellow in this. There might be a little bit on the moon, very light yellow, that we can do after. But if I started to put yellow into here, we'd end up with a lot of green, and that says storms to me. So I try and avoid yellow where I can. Okay, so we've got that pinky purpley colour on there now. Now I've got this gorgeous blue, so I'm just going to smush a bit of the blue around here. I can see blue in there. So what we're doing is filling the background in first, and then we're going to work towards the surface. So we're going to start to build up the surface as we go. Okay, so just lightly putting a bit of this beautiful blue through here. You don't want too much, we just want a little bit. So just lightly, and we can add more as we go, if we need to, as we need to. Okay, so then we're working up towards the lighter colours now. So what I want to do is put a bit of this orange on. So there is a yellow in orange, and that's why when it's mixed with blue, it's going to turn into this kind of muddy brown colour. So I might decide down the track that I don't like the orange, but I'm going to stick it on for now, because if you've done pastels before, you'll know that they're quite forgiving, and we can actually build up layers and cover things up if we don't like them. So I'm just going to pop some orange where I can see orange areas. So around over here. So where I've mixed, we've got this lovely dark blue on my paper, and I'm putting a bit of orange on the right-hand side here. So that's going to end up getting a bit muddy, but that's okay. I'm not going to mind that, I don't think. So a bit of orange, nice and bright and light, that's nice. And then I'm going to jump straight over to my pinky colours. This is my lighter pink. Now when you're using these lighter colours, just be aware that there's a fair bit of white mixed in with these ones. So to make a light pink or a pale purple that we're about to use in next time, means that there's been white mixed in with your pastels when they make them. So white makes everything more opaque or not so see-through. It can get a little bit kind of dull sometimes, depending on how you apply it. So just be aware of that these lighter pastels have white in them, and often they can look a little bit milky. So that's not a bad thing in this instance. I think that'll work okay. Okay, so I'm just running a bit of my light pink around. Now you can see, if you just squint at your reference photo, you can see, you know, the bottom half almost is really dark. And then as we go up towards the top, we get a lot more light in the clouds, and of course the moon. So the moon is casting the light onto the clouds. So we need to kind of remember that so that we know where to put all the light bits. Okay. I'm just going to put a little bit of this pink down here, and I'm going to pop a bit of my very light blue and lilac over that to create a lighter cloud colour. Okay, so we're just going really light at the moment. You can see I'm not pressing very hard, so I haven't got a whole lot of pastel on the paper just yet. It's a little bit of a process. It's just building up all these layers. I picked up my violet or my lilac colour now. So I'm just going to put a bit of that around. So you can see straight away that's actually lighter than anything else I've used so far. And so knowing that, I can pop that down where I can see the lighter clouds. So we've got a lovely light one over here on the left of the moon. And then in behind it, we've got some light cloud in there as well. So they don't need to look like clouds just yet. But just put your light down where you can see those little light sections. The hardest thing with clouds is making sure that you get them all to look natural and random. So you don't want to have the same size and the same shape repeating itself, because you'll find mostly clouds don't actually do that. They are all sort of very natural, random shapes, and they all have their own little edges and shapes and things. And the biggest problem, I guess, or the biggest thing to be aware of is making patterns. So we want to try and keep it very loose and random, and not create too much pattern, because patterns are not what you see in nature usually. All right, so that's my lilac. So see how that's now starting to look like the lighter little areas are popping forward. Now I've got my pale blue, so I'm going to pop a bit of that down as well. Note we haven't done the moon yet, so we're just working on the clouds, and then we'll come back and put the moon in, and then we'll put the other little clouds in front of it. I just want to create this beautiful, fluffy, cloudy background first. So don't worry if you haven't put enough colour down. You can always come back and add more over the top. It's okay. So it's not like you can't pick up orange again and put it down afterwards. You can always do that. So you can see how this is all starting to kind of create the tones. So remember, the tones are really important. I've just picked up that purple. This is my bluey purple, or blue sky blue colour. That's lovely. So I can see a lot of that around the moon itself, in the clouds and in behind the moon. So I'm just getting some of that down on the paper too. Now don't be afraid to overlap with the area where the moon will go. So you can see, obviously, I'm going to take the clouds in behind the moon, so we need to sort of drag them across so that you haven't got a big hole or a big line or edge around the moon. So make sure that you bring the clouds in close enough so that when we draw the moon on afterwards, they're going to overlap and have a continuous background. Okay, so it looks a bit funny at the moment because we've just got all this pastel on the paper, but that's what we need to do to get started, because we're blocking in and we're just creating a really nice base to build on. I do enjoy this blue colour, quite lovely. There we are. Okay, so now if you've got enough pastel down on your paper, now's the time to start kind of pushing it around with our fingers. What we want to do is push it into the paper and get it to sort of all start to mix together a little bit. What's going to happen is it'll go a little bit muddy and it'll look a bit kind of murky and dirty, but that's okay, because then we can pop more pastel over the top. So don't worry too much if it gets a bit muddy and ugly. It's called the ugly stage sometimes. So you can see as I've applied that, there's quite a lot of black paper showing through still. So when I start to push this in, we'll still be able to see quite a lot of the dark underneath. Now I can choose to leave it like that, or I can fill the whole thing in with pastel. It's up to you. So everybody works differently. Some people love to blend, some don't. It can make your fingers feel a little bit raw when you do a lot of it. And if you have surgical gloves, then you might prefer to put those on, because sometimes that can be a good option, because you don't get as dirty and it also helps to blend in without making your fingers a bit scratchy. So what I'm going to do is start up in this right hand top corner. And what I've done, I'm just getting my one finger and literally just doing, see these little circular movements with it? Little round fluffy movements. Because the clouds are sort of all fluffy, all the edges kind of blur into each other. And what I want to do is create that lovely feeling of fluffy clouds. So you can see as I'm moving across the page with those little fluffy round movements with my finger, see how it's creating a cloudy effect? And just have a look at the picture and notice the shapes of the different areas of clouds. So you might have to get a little hand towel or something. I've just got a dry one here to give your fingers a wipe if you feel like you get too much colour on them. And you'll find if you press harder when you're blending like this, you'll make more mud. So when I say mud, I just mean browny kind of colours. So the harder you press, it kind of goes darker and dirtier or muddier. And then if you press light, it sort of lets the colour sit on the top, sit on the surface. So at this point in time, you can press a little bit heavier if you want, just to get the pastel to stick to the paper, because we're going to come back in and add more. So don't stress if you feel like it's all getting a bit too dirty. Where you've got those little dark sections showing through in between the light clouds, maybe try and leave some of that undone or add a bit of dark blue into that section there and push it through. It's all about how hard you press too. So if I started to really just push all of this, together, it would just end up a big kind of muddy mess. So what you got to try to do is keep the colours sort of separate and just gently blend them around the edges. So when I'm coming into a new colour, for instance, this pinky colour up here on the top, I've just wiped my finger off, didn't make much difference. I should get my cloth and wet it. So I've got a reasonably clean finger. So what I don't want to do is come into this area with some of this dark blue on my finger already, because it's just going to make this dirtier. So you need to kind of clean or wipe your finger off in between the colours and then start into this colour here and just kind of push your finger around within that colour. Just go over to the edges a little bit and sort of blur them off as they merge into other colours. But it kind of helps to keep that colour more pure, I guess. Okay, and then you can give your finger a wipe and then start off in another area. So just remember, if you've got dirty fingers, it's going to put that colour into the next area that you touch. So just be aware of what you're putting where and if you need to clean your finger off or not. But as I said, what we're doing right now is just getting some colour pushed into the paper. So you can see this light pink up the top here. I haven't really put a lot down so that it's not sort of hanging on. It's not quite heavy or thick enough. If you feel like you want to add more as you go, then don't be afraid to pick up that pastel again like this and put it down a bit heavier and then have another go at pushing it around. Because what you want to do is get that nice and thick and lush in there. Okay, and just be aware of the dark areas too around the clouds. So, for instance, under here, we've got a little bit of a dark area. I'll just grab a pencil so I can point at it. Inside there, that section there. So what we want to do is try and leave that little area kind of dark or darker and this area lighter, so that we're getting that lovely contrast between your lights and your darks in here. And that's the secret to this, is just not pressing too hard and not making anything too muddy, just trying to keep it pretty light. And I know this is like a opaque sort of pink. I know I can come back afterwards. I'll just show you, and I can add a bit of my light blue maybe just into that section there because it's a little bit lighter, and I can push that around and start to create a lovely range of colours. So see how that's now glowing a little bit here on this section, because I didn't blend it too much. So what I've done is I've kind of put the pastel down on the paper like that and lightly touched it, so it just sits on the surface, but then I've blended more or pressed harder on the other side, so that now I'm starting to create that really subtle difference between the light and the dark. Does that make sense? So if you let the pastel sit on the top, you'll get a much more opaque and stronger colour. That was just a little example. We don't need to do that right now. We can come back to that. So I'm just moving across the top of this with my finger. Again, little squiggly round marks. And as I go across, I'm doing little like clockwise little movements, and then I'm going the opposite direction. So I'm just sort of varying the movement of my finger, because what I want to do is try and create this fluffiness of the clouds. So you need to do fluffy movements with your fingers. It's as if you had a paintbrush in your hand and you'd be kind of fluffing it around to get the paint to look fluffy. So imagine your fingers are a paintbrush, and you can do exactly the same thing with your fingers. And again, remember to wipe off in between your light and your darks, because you don't want to kind of contaminate all the light areas too much. So just in here around the moon, where it's quite dark on the top left or top of the moon there, I've got my dark blue in the background. And see those little clouds that sit in front of the moon? We're not going to put those in just yet. So what we're looking at now is the background and the dark sky behind those clouds. I can come back afterwards and pop a little bit of light in there and get those bright clouds in. So I'm just pulling some sky through here. Now, interesting, as I do that and I know that it's sky, I'm going kind of sideways now, because I know that sky is kind of big and flat. Well, not flat, but wide. So what I want to do is little wide movements with my fingers rather than fluffy ones, because then I can put the fluffy clouds in front of those later. So think about what you're painting and the direction that it goes in, pretty much, and that will help you to determine how to move your fingers and what shapes you want to create. Okay, so now I'm back over here on the left side. I'm doing some more little fluffy, cloudy movements. See, as I work my way around the painting, I'm pretty much going from top to bottom, and it's all starting to merge nicely together. And then we can come back in and make some highlights and dark areas and things. So just gently pushing this all into the paper. What I want the pastel to do is stick to the paper and hold on to it nice and tight, so then I can add more over the top after. So what I did, I'll just go back to this dark blue section here. That to me looks like sky behind the clouds and behind the moon. So obviously the moon's not there yet. So I've kind of pushed that in first, and then I've come over with this lighter cloud here because it sits in the front. So kind of dragging the pigment of that slightly across so that I'm getting that lovely wispy, soft merge from the lighter cloud sitting on top of the sky, if that makes sense. And then moving down and around the picture. Again, soft little movements. So depending, just remember what you're actually doing at the time to know how to move your hand or your finger. So around this area here is where those bright clouds sit in front of the moon, but we've got to give it some background first, haven't we? Because there's other stuff behind it. So we're kind of looking at what's behind everything at the moment in this area. So you can see on the picture there's that bright cloud there, but we'll put that in afterwards, not yet. What I'm looking at now is what's sitting behind it down through there. So we need to get that background stuff in. And I feel like I need to add a bit more pastel because it's not quite enough to fill the paper. So I just put a bit more blue on there. I'm just going to push that through. So remember too, if I put down a mid-tone here, like a mid-tone blue I could even go for this pinky colour maybe, pop a bit of that in there. So I'm just looking at all the colours. There's so many colours in here. And pink on blue will make sort of a purpley lilac-y colour, which is quite nice, quite lovely. And afterwards I can come back in. You can nearly see the edge of the cloud there that I've formed, and not necessarily deliberately, but can you see the edges around here? It's a little lighter, so it's almost by accident that you create these beautiful clouds. It's all about how you move your fingers. Okay, I'm just going to put a bit more orange on here. So you might find if you don't have enough pastel on your paper, it's kind of leaving little patchy marks. Now, if you like how that looks, then by all means leave it. But I love filling up my paper. Just can't help myself with pigment. So see that bit there? I've just put a little bit of my light pink and then over my orange. And so that's creating this really yummy, I don't know, pinky orangey colour, I guess. And then I can sort of push that in around here too. And, oh, lovely. So now it's starting to look like a little bit of a sunset kind of stormy sky. How nice is that? So as you're doing it, just look at each little section as you go. When you look back at the whole thing, you might think, oh my goodness, what a mess. Just do each part, each little piece as you go. And that's another good reason that, you know, we divide the page into quarters, because we can kind of break it down into sections. So my orange is a little bit too orange, so I can just add a bit more pink over the top of that to quieten it down a bit. You might like yours to be brighter. Everyone's going to have different results depending on what colours you use and the way you move your fingers. Kind of fun. Okay, so I'm just going to hop over onto the other side here now. Make sure I give my clean fingers a wipe and just start to rub in around this area here. And you might, again, I'm noticing that I probably don't have quite enough pastel on the paper. So some of my black paper is showing through. That's okay, it's giving me some nice depth. But I probably will add more pastel to that because I just feel like it's not enough. So again, those little wiggly, soft movements, kind of pushing all the pastel around. And because we've put different colours in different areas, so we've got lights and darks, it's all starting to feel like we're building up some nice layers now. Pushing, pushing. And I'm pushing a little bit harder. So as I come down into this area, it's a little bit darker. So I just want to push a bit firmer. What happens when I do that is it gets muddier and kind of murky, which is not a bad thing, because remember, if we're just doing the background now, and then we want to come back in and put some really nice little bright sections in. So if you do make a bit of mud, that's okay, because then we've got a nice base to build those clouds on top of. So I'm just going to add a bit more pastel over here. I just want to get a bit more on the page. Kind of just imagining where the moon is going to sit in relation to what I'm doing here. So when I push this in, that was my pale blue. When I push that in, I press pretty hard, it's going to just sort of merge in nicely with what's there already. And again, make sure you vary those movements with your fingers. So you want to go little clockwise, round, fluffy movements, and then anti-clockwise, a little bit up and down. Kind of just try and move your hand around randomly, because that's what we want to create, is this lovely random layer of clouds. So you can see how that's starting to build up now. And because we've got some dark down underneath, all these lighter sections are starting to look like they're sitting on the top now. So that's the goal, is to create these lovely layers of clouds. And I just want to say this will not look exactly like the other one, like the reference photo, because It's really hard to do the same thing twice, especially when I can't remember what colours I had. Okay. So again, just wiggling my little fingers around on here. If your finger's getting sore by now, you might want to swap it over and use a different one. I've kind of left this section here where the moon's going to be. Haven't filled all of that in. One reason for that is I want to try and have some pure paper, or paper where there's no pastel underneath it, so I can get that really bright, shiny bit on the moon there. And I think I actually used a very pale lemon to do that, not necessarily white, or maybe a combination of the two. So when you want to put a light colour down and you want to keep it really bright, the best thing to try and do is leave the paper unfilled in that section, or around about where that will be, so that you just can focus on keeping your colour nice and pure. Okay, so I'm going to move down now into this area here, so where this little bit of orange is, and it's much more orange here than what I've got on the actual photo, but that's okay. As I said earlier, we can come back in and tone that down or brighten it up, do what we need to do. So this is essentially just a picture of clouds, really, with a circle in the middle. But clouds are fun because you can kind of just create your own shapes. And with pastels, it's even better because you can kind of push it around and have a bit of a play with it. And I know that if I want to change anything, all I have to do is add a bit more pastel, or move it around in a different direction, and things will change quite quickly. So the lovely thing about it is it's not going to dry out or go off or anything like that. You have a lot of movement with pastel, and you can actually change it anytime. Even if I come back to this in a year, I can still adjust it because it never changes. It just sits there on the surface and stays the same. So it's kind of cool like that. All right, so now we're moving down into the darker section as we come across. And we're going to do the same kind of movements in this area where I've got all these beautiful dark colours. So my dark blues and my purples and my magentas. And this is still cloud, it's just in shadow. So what we want to do is the same kind of movement with the pastel that we've got down in here. And I don't know if you can see very well on the screen, but it's very subtle. The slight differences in colour, but there's definitely, a mixture of purples and blues in there. So these clouds could possibly be a little bit bigger or fluffier. Hard to say, really. But again, just moving across your page, doing your fluffy movements. Keep checking back at your reference photo to see the shapes and colours and things. And remember too, if you've got dark blue on your finger and put it into your orange like that, you're going to get muddy sort of colours, which I'm not that upset about, to be honest. I quite like it. So the other thing to remember is to try and keep your shapes nice and random. So, as I said earlier, you don't want to have the same size cloud everywhere, or the same shape cloud, dotted around, because it just looks like it's been drawn on. So this is all nature, and skies are always different. So don't be afraid to mix it up a little bit and kind of, if you're sick of using one finger, you can maybe, let's try two. You put two down in here, or use a different one. And again, I'm just pushing this lovely colour around. I've got black underneath and some of that's still showing through. I might just let that do that because it's kind of nice. So it creates a bit of drama and interest. Just remember, if you do put your fingers back down in another section, you're going to add darks, which is not a bad thing if you want to. I just thought I've got this dark blue on my fingers. I might pop a bit of that up here while it's on my hand and just smush it in around there. So you can kind of see now how this is going to build up and create a really lovely, fluffy, cloudy sky. Okay. So I've got this cool shape over here. I quite like how that's looking. And when we put the little clouds on the front of it, then that's going to become a nice dark sky in the background. So what we're trying to do is create a nice range of distance. So there's, there's background things, and then there's clouds that sit on top of each other. So it's really about looking at how it's all kind of layered together and where everything sits in relation to each other. So what I'm going to do now is take a little break, and we'll come back in a few minutes. Okay, so I've had a little break, little tea break, and now we're going to get stuck into doing the next layer of our clouds. So we've got a nice base layer down there now, and it's time to build that up. So you can actually get quite a few layers of pastel onto your page. So if you feel like I can't get any more on there, it's probably not true. Of course, it will depend on what pastels you've used and how heavy you've put it down, and also what kind of paper you're using. So if you've got the good stuff, the good pastel paper and good quality pastels, then you won't have any trouble. All right, so down the bottom here, I'm feeling like I've probably got enough on there, and I probably don't really want to add too much more. Might put a little bit more, I think this bluey colour, just looking back at the picture, it's almost got some sort of light sections coming down through there. Can you see that happening? So what I've done is I've just lightly wiped this mid blue over that, and then I'm going to just gently push it in. So to me that looks like some lighter cloud just sitting here on top of all these darker ones, or lighter parts of clouds. So very gently, very lightly, not pushing very hard at all, just again lightly just moving this pigment around with my fingers to create a slightly lighter section within that cloud bank there. Now in the painting, I think it looks a bit more purple than that. So if you feel like you want to change the colour or darken it again, by all means you can. This is the best part about this. You can actually do whatever you want. And when I am doing stuff like this, I'm just putting a bit of magenta on there now, just to purple it up a bit more. When I am doing things like this, I just go lightly at first. So if you're kind of feeling, ooh, I wonder what that'll look like, or add a little bit of red or something to that, just press lightly, just put a little bit of pastel down, then gently blend it in lightly. And then if you feel like you want to press harder to darken it, you can do that. If you want to put more light on, you can do that. So you can keep kind of adding and adjusting as you go. It's quite lovely. So see how that's now created just another little, I guess, layer of clouds on top of that big dark bank at the base there. So just very subtle little changes in colour or tone, and you can really build up a nice layer. And you don't have to do that. I mean, it's up to you. If you don't like it, just go back over it with your dark pastel and push it all back in. That might create something new and interesting that you weren't expecting. So this is the nice thing about it, actually. It's lovely because you can kind of just try different things, and if something doesn't work out, just cover it up. And sometimes you get a lovely surprise and something awesome comes of it. So it's all a little bit experimental, I guess. Okay, so now we need to figure out which clouds are sort of in front and which ones are behind. I'm going to go back up to the very top now and see this top area up here that I started doing a bit of detail on earlier. So I'm just going to start to work a little bit more on that. But first I want to make sure that I get all the dark in that's going to sit behind this cloud. So I'm just going to lightly pop a bit of dark blue, very lightly, just to show you where I mean. So up the top across here, it's darker, so I can see some dark sky through there. And then I want to patch a little bit of it down in through here as well. Okay, what I'm trying to do is create this background behind that light cloud that's sitting up at the top there. Okay, so let's just push some of this dark in again, and it'll blend with what's already there, and that's okay, that's fine, because it's just creating really lovely fuzzy little edges. And gentle. So you find doing this, you just want to press really, really light, lovely and gentle, and that way we can build the layers up without getting in too soon. See, that's already starting to look quite nice and cloudy. It's amazing what happens, and sometimes it's just a happy accident, and then you can take all the accolades for it. All right. So this little cloud at the top here, got my light pink color. So I'm going to use that to start, and then I can add either white or my violet color over the top if I want to make it lighter again. So I'm just going to put a little bit of pink down on there, and then gently push that in. So again, those soft little fluffy movements with your fingers, gently pushing to create that gorgeous light colored cloud on top of the darker sky. So that's a little bit more emphasized than what's on the actual picture. I don't mind it though. I think I might leave it like that. I quite like what's going on. And then I'm going to pick up my lighter blue and just add a little bit of that. So what we're doing is just putting little bits of color on at a time, and then softly pushing it in and seeing what it looks like. And when you're working up close on something like this, often it doesn't look too good. You think, oh my goodness, what's going on here? So it's great if you can step back from your picture. So if you are on an easel or if you're sitting at a table, just get up and step back and look at it from a distance, and you'll see that it's actually quite great and not as messy as you first imagine. Okay, I think I'm going to have to go and get a bit of very pale yellow, but anyway, we'll stick with this for now. And now we've got that little cloud in there. See, in behind it, there's quite a lot of sort of light cloud in there as well. So I'm just going to use, what am I going to use? This blue. So what I want to do is start off with a darker kind of blue, just to build up some of that bank of cloud through there, and push that around like this. And then I can put some more light on top. So kind of just figuring out where everything sits in relation to each other. Some things look like they're even, and there's not one in front of the other because there might be a gap between the two clouds. And then you've got other ones that sit right on top of the other ones. So then I'm going to come in with my pale blue. So I've just put my mid blue down there, come in with my pale blue, and gently smish that around too. So I'm literally using the little stick of pastel on its side. Using it on its side like this, you get a much softer mark. Okay, so, and then you don't have to press very hard to get it to stick, and it just has this beautiful transparent kind of effect on the paper because the paper's textured, so it kind of leaves little gaps, and then you can come in and very lightly push it around, and then you start to see that lovely transparent cloud look. So you can kind of see the dark sky behind it and the dark blues, and then the lighter blues sort of sit on the top. And again, that will depend on how hard you press. So if you press hard, you'll make the colours more opaque, and if you press light, then they'll sort of sit on the top of whatever's underneath. And again, those little wiggly movements with your fingers will create those lovely cloudy effects. So it's just about coming in and out with different colours and figuring out which colour's lighter as far as these little light ones go. So this is my lilac colour. And it's about the same tone as what I've just created, but it's got that lovely pink tinge to it. So I'm going to leave that right there as it is. It's nice. So we're all creating our own version of this cloudy sky. I'm just going to tip off some of my dust. You can see there's a bit of dust there gathering on the page. If you do have dust, it's always a good idea to tip it off rather than blowing it, because blowing it just puts it everywhere and it can get into everything. So try not to mess up your house too much. All right, so I'm just looking at this area here now on the top right. So let's just work in this quarter for now and get some of the highlights and things going on in there. We've got a little bit of dark sky already happening, and we've got a nice foundation of cloud going on in there. So what I want to do is start to bring in this light section through here on the top right there. I'm going to start with my pale blue, because I know if I want to, I can go lighter. I can add white and lighten it a little bit more. I'm going to start with that and just put that down as a base and see how it looks. And again, I'm literally just lying it flat on the page and working my way gently, gently with it. So softly, softly blending that in through here. Okay, and then I can again get my fingers into there and just start to push it around a little bit. So this cloud looks like it's sitting on top of whatever else is there behind it. So it's sort of in front. So again, if you're getting little dots or funny little shapes in there, it might be because you haven't got enough pigment on the page, or you're not pressing hard enough to blend it in. If you like that transparency kind of effect, then don't press too hard and let it just sit there. It's all about adjusting the pressure and becoming familiar with, you know, what works and what effect you want to have. I'm just touching up this top right hand corner. I need it to get more pastel on there. Push that in to get that orangey pinky cloud happening. And again, see, I've sort of pushed all that in now, made it a little bit muddy, which is fine. And then if I want to have a brighter section on there, there's a little bit of bright just in here, then I can use my pink to make that a bit more intense and just gently dab that in. So as you build up your layers, you want to maybe press less hard and let some of that colour sit on the surface so that you get that beautiful glow happening. And then I can see there's some purple in here. Purple and orange will make mud, or grey or brown. And I don't mind that at all, as long as you don't put too much in there to make it too dirty, unless you want a big stormy cloud. So that's looking quite okay. And then I can come back into this one where I was working on it before with the pale blue, and I can highlight some of those spots in there, so you can see, you know, there's little bits of light coming through. So clouds have areas of them that are more intense than others. So even though it's one shape and looks like it's one colour, you'll find if you look closely that some areas are brighter or lighter than others. And so using the same colour, so using that same colour pale blue, I've just put a little bit more pigment down and I'm pressing less hard. So now it's creating a nice range of light to mid within the same colour, if that makes sense. So see how when I put this light blue down over that again, I'm getting more light in there. So that's how we're going to build up these little light areas of cloud that kind of sit on top of each other. And if I just leave the pastel on there like that, it has this beautiful cloudy effect. Pastels are beautiful for clouds. Once you get the hang of it and figure out the pressure and things like that, it really does lend itself beautifully to clouds. So that's again just that pale blue colour on top of the already pale blue colour. Now I haven't blended this layer in. And so you can see it's starting to look very, very cloudy. And that's where we want to get to. We want to get to the point where you're actually not pushing it in. We want to let some of this sit on the top so that you get that lovely fluffy kind of effect. And then, for instance, in that place there, so that looks a bit odd. So what I want to do is just I want to put a bit of my blue, my darker, not darkest, but my mid blue in there, just because I want to shush that around a little bit more. And then I can gently push that in and start to create some really nice layering of clouds there. So see how I had the lighter blue underneath, and I've just gone over that with a little bit of the darker blue, but just gently pushing it with my fingers so that you're starting to get like a layer of cloud on top of the lighter cloud, and it looks like it's sitting over the top of it, wafting across. There's a bit of wind and it's blowing those clouds around. So it's a bit of a process, takes a little while to make everything kind of as bright or as not so bright as you need it to be in different areas. And again, it's really just about how you apply the pastel. I can mix my pink and my blue and make beautiful little lilac-y colours. So there does come a point though where when you've got enough pastel on the page, you don't want to push in too much more. You just want to start to then press a bit lighter and let those little highlights come through. So just be aware of that. The more you blend with your fingers, the more you're making mud. So mud is fine for that first layer that we've just done, but now we're starting to build up the banks of clouds, and we're starting to really emphasize some of the lights and the darks and so forth. So what we want to do is really just let a lot of it sit on the top and do its thing. And that's, as I said, you get that beautiful cloudy effect. So far I haven't used any white. I'm just looking at those clouds up the top there. I feel like I need to push this in a little bit more. I'll try some lilac. And see, as I kind of wipe that over now, I'm getting this lovely transparency going on through here, and it's quite beautiful. So the texture of the paper gives you the opportunity to create that beautiful transparent feeling of the light clouds, because it's just mist, isn't it, really? They're not solid at all. So in some areas they can look quite solid and strong in colour, and then in other areas they're quite wispy and soft. And so don't be afraid to then add, again I haven't used white yet, I'm just going to add a little bit of my pale blue on the edges there, just to lighten up that little bit. See how it lit up the bottom of that cloud there? It's just being gentle and careful and going slowly and letting it all come together. So each little cloud has its own shape and its own personality. And so it's just a matter of finding those shapes and then figuring out, how hard to press and whether to blend or not, to get the different effects that you want. I'm just using my lilac over here now. So don't be afraid to kind of put one colour down and pick up another one and then, dance between your colours. It's not like they're going to dry out and you can't use it again. So it's not, it's a good thing to sort of dance between the colours a little bit. So just because I put dark blue down and I haven't touched it again doesn't mean I still can't do that. I can. And you've just got to kind of have a bit of a play with your colours. Put your blue over your purple, put your pink over your blue, see what happens. It might look beautiful, it might not. If it doesn't, just put something else there. As I'm moving down into this little bank of clouds, you can see it's quite thick and fluffy, and different areas are catching the light. So I'm using my light blue again. I quite like this light blue colour. It's nice for the highlights, and I know that if I want to highlight something even more, I can come back with white, and the white will just make it pop in a couple of spots, which is very exciting. That's why I like to save the white for last, because then you can get a little bit of joy at the end when you make those little lights bounce out of your page. So I can see I'm starting to make patterns around in here because I'm using the pastel in the same way. I'm kind of holding it in the same angle, and I'm moving it in the same direction. So if you're trying to get randomness going on, I'm always trying to do that with these sorts of things, then you need to twist your arm a little bit and kind of move things around more to create that feeling of natural clouds. I'm just going to pop over this side now and put some of these little ones here in the back. So see, we've got that beautiful dark sky right there. So what's going to happen when we pop the moon on, that dark sky is going to make the moon look way brighter. So when you want something to be light and bright, you need to have a dark next to it. So just keep some of that dark there if you've got that, and that will make the moon bounce afterwards. Anyway, I wandered away and I got carried away with myself back into this quarter. It's hard to stay in one place sometimes. So now I'm just moving my finger around randomly, trying to get this little fluffiness happening, because I've got more pastel in some areas than others, and so it's looking a bit more opaque or brighter in some spots, and then kind of more muted and greyed off in others, which is not a bad thing at all. It's good. Just make sure you keep moving your finger in those little round, fluffy sort of shapes, and try to vary them as well. I know that sounds a bit oxymoron, but even though we're doing round, fluffy shapes, you kind of want to wander around a little bit on your page to create that sort of randomness shape. So try not to run across in a straight line and do all the same little bumps, because then it'll look like it's been painted. It won't look natural. It's so easy to do. Just create, the same shapes and patterns everywhere. So I'm feeling like some of that's a little bit too light. So I'm going to get some of my purple now. This is the darker purple. And I just want to smush a little bit of that around. So when you're putting dark in, be sort of careful. Don't go too crazy with it, because it can stain the paper, and sometimes it's a bit tricky to get off if you don't like it. So I'm just going to smush a bit of that around, just very lightly, to try and create a bit more tone in the clouds. Because what I want to do is have, shadow areas that are slightly darker, and then the brighter sections where the light's catching. So again, just little random wiggly movements with my fingers to push that in. Got purple down here in my orange, which is getting a bit muddy, but I don't mind that right now. It's quite nice. And pulling that down into the dark area underneath. I'm going to go into some of those dark spots with my dark blue now. So I just want a little bit more drama. Drama is always created with your dark and light. So sometimes we're a bit scared to put too much dark down. And even though I'm going quite lightly here, I don't want to stain it too much, but I still want to get some of that dark blue in there to create a little bit of drama. So again, just touch it on lightly and then gently blend it through softly. And then we can come back with light and add a bit more of the highlight. So see how we're kind of going between the two, always sort of dancing between your colours and your tones. And you can get a few layers on here. So if you feel like, you know, you've got enough colour down on there, you can, if it is full, you can always add a little bit of fixative, spray the fixative onto it, and that will set one layer, and then you can add more over the top. So fixative is lovely if you want to build up some layers and get more pastel onto your page. Cool. All right, so now I want to come back in with some more light. I'm going to try the blue again, because I know now that I've pushed things around, it's lost its vibrancy in some spots. So I can come back in and put those back in. So see how that's now starting to glow against that darker background. So the blue, the pale blue is really nice for that, or your lilac, or whatever you're using. And again, I'm just lightly running it over the top of my page, my paper. And so that's creating a lovely little glow. I've got a nice little light section down in here. So I've just moved down into that other quarter on the right to get a bit of light onto there. And again, I'm just going to very, very gently, lightly run this finger over some of those spots. Lightly. What I want it to do is just sort of stick to the paper but not blend in and go muddy again. So when you want it to kind of glow like this, just go very lightly, or not at all if you don't want to. If you're happy to leave it. Okay. I'll just show you what white will do. So this is my white, and if I want to add some little highlights just here and there, I can add a bit of white in here. And see how that just gives it some shine. This is very creamy, this one. Sometimes the creamy ones don't like to stick too well. See how that's just brightened up the edge of that cloud? So that's created a lovely little bright highlight sort of area. I can do the same down there. So you don't want to overdo it though. If I put white everywhere, then it becomes kind of obsolete and gets a little bit lost in the noise. So save your white for the really bright bits. Lovely. Okay, so now we've probably done enough on that side for now. As I said earlier, you can always come back and you know, darken off or blend in or add some more colours and just muck around with it a little bit. We're going to move across into this section over here now, and then we'll pop the moon on. So over here on this area, we've got this little cloud that sits up in here. I'm just going to do it in my blue again, just through there, and then it kind of wanders over to there. Got this lovely little, it's like a nice wide skinny little cloud. I'll pop a bit of purple in there as well. So not purple, my violet or lilac, really light purpley colour. And then just gently push that in so that we get a nice cloudy effect on that one. And I can add a bit of white to it, a couple of spots on there to brighten that one up too. So I'm trying to create different shapes of clouds so that, you know, it's interesting. We want the eye to kind of wander around this painting. The first thing you see, of course, is the moon, but then we kind of want it to wander around and discover all the shapes and tones and colours and things. That's the fun bit. Okay, so I've done that one pretty quickly. You can do them pretty quickly once you get the hang of it. And I might just put a little bit more violet onto this background cloud before we put the moon in. just want to make sure we get that one done, because once we've done this one, put the moon over the top, it's going to be harder to get back in there to change it. So I like to kind of try and do everything that's in the back first, and then I can pop the other thing on the next layer, basically. Just putting a little bit. Don't be afraid to mix your colours around a little bit to get a bit of fluff happening in there. There we go. That's nice. All right, so now we want to put the moon in. I've left all this area fairly dark because I want that to kind of make the moon pop a bit. And I said on the notes you might want to use something round to draw it on, because it's pretty hard to do a perfect circle. So what I've got here is my tape. I'm just going to use that. And I've lost my grid mark, obviously, but maybe we should mark that back in just on the sides of the page so we can figure out where this needs to sit. So just going to put little marks on the edges like this, and that way, should have done that at the start. Then you can kind of find them again and refer to the distance between everything. Okay, so I've got my marks there and there. And then I can go, okay, so that's there and that's there. So the moon will be about just to the right of there. So I'm literally going to just drop this down onto my page like that and make the moon be, it's going to be a bit higher. I'm probably making it a bit big actually, but never mind. Who's going to know? So I'm going to pop my moon there. So it's slightly off center. So they're my center lines, and it's sitting more in this top right hand corner. So we don't want it to be bang in the middle. Should use a white pencil. I have one. There we go. This is a white charcoal pencil. So I'm just literally going to trace around that to draw my circle. Ta-da! It is a bit big, but never mind. And then we can start to fill this in, and then we'll put some clouds in front of it. So again, I don't want to use my white just yet. I'll save my white for last. So I'm going to go with it looks more violet to me. So I'm just going to fill in the moon with some violet. Now, you can always go lighter. So if it's not light enough, we can go lighter. So a bit of violet, and then maybe some of this light blue, because what we're trying to get is that lovely texture. Can you see the texture on the moon there? It's got this sort of purpley colour underneath all the little white or brighter shapes. Now, I don't know if it's the actual shapes on the moon. I think I just, put them wherever they landed, which is okay. So we've got pale blue and lilac on there. I'm going to push that around with my fingers. So the main thing you want to be sure of here is to keep the edge nice and crisp. So try not to go outside the lines and make it blurry. If you do, we can sharpen it up again with your pencil or your white pastel. Now, as I'm pushing that around, see how I'm not pushing too hard. So I just want to retain some of the texture that's been created throughout that, because the moon has texture, doesn't it? It's got all those interesting little shapes in there. I'm going to tip off some of this dust. Remember, we can go lighter. We can always go lighter. I just don't want to start off too light, because then you don't give yourself any space to brighten things up. Now, before we do that though, let's have a look at this. We've got a bit of dark in there. So I'm going to add a bit of this darker purple. See on those little patches, looks like a map of the world almost, with little white countries in there. I'm going to pop a bit of this purpley colour through there. Okay. And maybe some of this dark blue as well, just to get a slightly different range going on. Very lightly and very gently push that in as well. Okay, so the right hand side of the moon is super bright, isn't it? It's like the whitest, brightest part. Then we've got all this interesting texture going on in here. Across the bottom of the moon, we've got those little clouds that sit there, and they've got some lovely dark underneath them, so that's really nice for some drama too. And then on the top left of the moon, we've got more cloud there. What we're looking at now, though, is what's underneath all of that. So if you can sort of ignore all the clouds and just look at the moon itself and find the different tones in there. So I know this is the darkest blue that I've used so far, and what I want to do is create a bit more dark so that the lights become brighter. Yeah. So this is what we're doing. We're creating some dark tones so that when we put the brights in, they're going to pop against these darker kind of tones. And just gently, gently pushing that around. I want to try and retain some of that texture, not blending it all the way in, just letting it kind of sit on the surface like the moon does. All right, lovely, lovely. Now, what we need to do is brighten up that right-hand side. So I'm going to go straight in with white and see how that goes. So I'm going to use the tip of my white. This looks like a dirty one, but they pick up colour from each other, and draw that on very carefully around the edge there. Taper it off as you get down to the base because the bottom of it is not as bright. And then just try and draw the pastel on without getting your fingers into it. We want to make this as bright as we can. So on that right hand side there, it's quite light all the way down through there. And then we've got all these little interesting light shapes. So again, I'm just going to draw those on. I'm not going to stick my fingers into this yet. I can't promise I won't because I might. And then just patch around the moon. So where you can see all the little white shapes, I'm just patching around on the moon to put those in. Now you might find it easier to use the side of your pastel depending on how big the stick is. Finding this one's too creamy. It's actually not sticking properly. I'm going to have to go find another one. Anyway, that's starting to come together, isn't it? I'm just going to tip off some dust. It's starting to take shape. I'm going to go find another white. Something a little bit less creamy than that. Puppy dog under my chair. I don't want to squash her. This one. All right, so I found an Art Spectrum one. Cool White A, that is. So I'm going to try that, see what happens. I think it might have a bit more of a yellow lemony tinge. Ah, there, that's better. Isn't it amazing how different whites can be? So that's just given me that shine that I wanted. Sometimes you've got to, have a look through your set and see what you've got. And often you might not have the right one. So then you've got to figure out, how can I make this brighter or shinier or whatever it is you're trying to do. So I'm trying to just let that sit on the surface and shine. I know if I blend it in with my fingers, it's just going to get muddy again. So you've got to keep sort of letting it sit there. And just drawing this on. Again, I'm just patching it on. So I'm just doing little random shapes on here. As I said, I don't know if this is the actual design on the moon. I think just whatever happened to work out at the time. So press harder if you want a more intense colour, and then lighter if you just want it to kind of merge in with the colours on the background. Okay, so that's coming together nicely. On the left-hand side, you can see there's a little glow here as well, just on the edge. So I'm going to try and pop that in. Sometimes it's hard to see the edge because your pastels are so chunky. You've got to kind of look over them. And to get a hard line like that, you've got to press pretty firmly just to get the brightness of the pastel to stick to the paper. Okay. So I need to kind of soften that off a little bit. Might just grab a blender. If you have a blender handy, you might find that's quite useful. I don't really want to get my fingers into this and dirty it. So a little blender will come in handy. I can just kind of move the pastel around on the paper with that and blend it in a little bit and merge the edges. So that's our moon. It's starting to really glow now. When we get some dark clouds in front of it, it'll glow even more. Okay, so I'll tip off my dust again. Cool, lovely, cool. All right, so now we've got that in place. And if you find you've gone outside the edges a little bit, like I've done, and it's not quite as smooth and round as you'd like it, just grab yourself a little bit of your kneadable eraser so you can pull a small piece off. Knead it into a knife edge shape, and then just very carefully pick up some of that white off there. So this is where it gets a little delicate, and pastels are so dry and chalky, it's hard sometimes to get those fine lines to work. So I usually just say, you know what, it's not going to be perfect because it's pastel and that's what they do. So you can clean it up a little bit like that. Next thing we want to do is pop some of those little clouds in front of the moon. So that's going to then give us some perspective and tell us how things are sitting in the sky. Okay, so it's kind of just hanging there by itself. It's nice, but I think a cloud or two in front of it will really make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to get this blue colour. I don't know if you can see there's these clouds at the top here, and they have this darker kind of blue. So I'm just going to very, very lightly zhoosh a bit of that across the front of the moon. So you don't want to do too much, and then carry it on across through here. And I'm going to pick up my light blue, or a light pastel anyway, to then add some little highlights to it. So just checking the picture, seeing where everything sits there. So you don't need to put it all the way across the moon, you just need to let it touch and overlap it a little bit there. So using that blue for starters, and then I can come back with my pale blue. So what I want to do now is get some of those little highlights on the tops of those clouds. And because they're closer to us, they're going to be more defined. So I'm just using the edge of my pastel, and I'm finding it tricky to see over my hand where I'm going with it. But I just kind of smush it around and hope for the best. And I know I can add white to a few spots on there to really give it some highlight. And then this one underneath, so same kind of thing there. I've got quite a large lighter section on that one. Sits a bit like that, Okay. Knowing too that clouds are transparent, so if you can see some of the moon through the cloud, that's okay too. I love clouds because you can just do anything really. Okay. And then I might grab a bit of purple and just sort of zhoosh that around in there too, just to create a little bit of variation in tone. So purple's lovely to get a bit of depth and shadow. Like that. And then we want to add a little bit of highlight, so you can grab your white. Now this is a big chunky piece of white. See what the pencil might do. If you have pencils, you might find that easier. White one. Where did it go? This is white charcoal. Needs a little sharpen actually. Just clean off the tip before you use it if you want to make sure it's nice and pure. And then I can just literally draw some of the edges on with that. It's picked up some of the blue underneath, but you get a really nice range of tones just by kind of mushing that around. And you get a harder line too, which is nice. It's not quite as white as I'd like it. I'm going to have to go for the pastel, I think, and try and get it to sit on the surface. So I'm going to do this. As I said, it's hard to see where you're putting it. Wing it. Oh yeah, that's good. Again, clouds are great because you can sort of put things wherever you want. And usually it works out. When you do a bright edge like that, just make sure it's a broken edge. So you don't want a hard, straight line. You want to have it kind of softened off and broken a little bit so it doesn't look like it's been drawn on. And then, you know, blenders are great too. So I'm just using a little blender there to push that around. So it's a little bit like having thick paint on your paper because you can move it around a bit. There we go. That'll do for that bit. Now we're going to move down and do this lovely cloud that sits here. So it's like fluffy over here on the left, and then it comes in and gets smaller and tapers off, and then it comes across the bottom of the moon there. So that's quite lovely. I feel like this is too blue. Hang on, I'm just going to darken that up a tad. This is my dark blue. So nice, I can come back in and change that around a little. And just define it a bit more. Remember I said before, if you want something to look bright, stick something dark next to it. So if I darken off that cloud, it'll make the moon pop a bit more. Lovely. So you can spend ages and ages on these. It's a bunch of fun, really. I've just covered up most of the white on that, but I can come back and pop more white on after. As long as I don't fill up the paper too much, then I've still got a fair bit of space to do that with. Cool, cool. All right. I just want to darken off this sky a little bit more in here so I can put that lighter cloud on top. Okay. So now I'm just going to tip the dust off because that's distracting me. Now let's focus on this other cloud after I do this bit. So we're getting into the fiddly bits now, where you just start to notice the detail. And, you know, you find if you push colour around like this with the clouds, it'll start to create its own little shape. Kind of fun. Don't know what's going on over there. Need to fix that bit. Brighten it up a bit. Okay, let's get on to this other one. So that cloud there that's sitting over on the left here has quite a lot of mauve and purple in it. So let's start with our mid purple because we can always go lighter. That's actually blue. Start with that. And it's above the halfway line. So it comes up around here. And then it sort of goes across through there. bit hard to see on with that colour, isn't it? It's very mid-tone. It's all blurring in with everything else. That's sort of where that sits. So if I pick up my lighter purple, then I can start to find a little flat edge, start to mark in the edges of that. So you can kind of see now where that's sitting. I probably made it slightly lower than the picture, but that doesn't really matter too much. Across like that. So, excuse my puppy, she's having a dream. Gently, gently blurring that in again. So just softly blending like we did with the other clouds before. To get that cloudy sort of shape. Running across like that. And I'm just going to add a bit more on the left here. So what I'm doing now is just coming back over it with my light pinky purple colour to try and create a little bit more variation in the layering there. So you can see now that's starting to look like there's, you know, cloud sitting on top of other cloud. It's got some lovely volume and texture. Lovely. And then it's quite dark under here. So again, we've got this darker cloud that kind of runs across the base of the moon there. A little bit of dark blue through that. And so literally just putting a bit of dark blue on there. And then I'm going to add my lights to get the highlights in there. Okay. And then I'm going to use my very light blue again, just to get the top edges on that. And then I can use white if I want to brighten it up even more. So again, I'm just trying to get the pastel to sit on the paper on its own without having to push it in too much. And then coming up into that lovely big bank of clouds there, there's a bit of light. So the light's off the moon and it's hitting the side of the cloud there. Like that. Cool, cool. And then got a bit more cloud across here as well. So there's like 2 lines of dark and then 2 lines of light, and they all sort of merge in together. Through there. Pop a little bit of mauve in there so it kind of looks like it belongs to the other cloud. And then I'm just going to risk putting my fingers into this to just soften off some of that dark underneath. And there we go. And so now to, what are we doing now? We're going to put a little bit of dark in front of this cloud here. So just over here on the left, I've got a bit of purple kind of sitting up in front of that, just to again create some layering and different depth, and just gently push that in. Like that. So now's a good time to stand up and walk away and come back and have another look at it, and just check that, you know, you've got enough lights and darks. I'm just coming back up into here with some dark. And now's the time, you know, you can just add some colours onto the top layer and either leave it to sit there or gently push stuff in just to get the colour to hold on. So it's starting to look pretty nice, I think. And then once we've got all that happening, I'm just going to darken off this little cloud over here on the left. I know I'm jumping all over the place now. This is what I do when I get to the end. You start noticing different bits that you need to touch up or, you know, finish off or whatever. And so that's what I'm doing pretty much. So it's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And again, now if you want the light to pop on that little cloud that's coming across the moon, we can put a bit of white just on the very edges. Again, so down here on the bottom, I'm going to try and find a sharp edge on my little pastel and do just a few little edges around the top there. So as I said earlier, you don't want to overdo it because then it'll lose its, you know, impact. Lovely. A few little bits of white. So once you find the right white, it works really nicely. So it's got a lovely little shine on it. So what the moon is doing is casting a nice light out to the clouds and catching all those little edges. So I reckon we're just about done. Just about done. Tidy up a couple of spots on here. And then we can call that pretty much complete. So that was a lesson in clouds and moons. I feel like I want to change this up here a little bit. So you can keep doing this, you know, but remember there does come a point where it's better to stop. And that's the hard part, isn't it? It's just knowing when to stop. Lovely. Now I can just come back in here with a little bit of light blue to highlight the top of that again. And so as you work towards the surface, you tend to leave the pastel sitting on the top and just letting it do its thing, creating its own textures. Quite nice. Quite lovely. I'll just bring a bit more across there through that, so that this is coming in front. So remember, you want to have perspective and create distance and things like that. So, you know, now you can see everything we did at the beginning is off in the background and behind. And then as we've worked forward, we've created this lovely layers of clouds. Beautiful. All right, so I'm going to call that done. And hope you enjoyed today's class. I did. It was kind of fun. And I look forward to seeing you again. And please send through your photos, because I'd love to see how you went. All right. And any comments or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. So don't be afraid to let me know how you felt and what you experienced, and if there's anything I can do to improve today's class. Well, last thing, don't forget to pop your name on it. So I don't really want to use white on the dark area because it's a little bit too bright. So here's a nice sort of orangey colour, so I can just put that there like that. Pastel pencil or charcoal pencil is your best option for signing. Lovely. Thanks for coming. See you next time.